Bird, 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 bird! Get him, get him, get him, get him, get him! Yeah! Ron Babe was right. Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. You know, sometimes you get lucky and I'm in a hurry. I'm packing up for a little grouse hunting trip. This is going to be, last week's was a very long intro. I thought it was really good though. I actually got people that wrote me, said, Ron, it was like you scripted it. No, sometimes I just segue my way into it. But today, we're going to keep it down to 2 minutes because a buddy of mine's coming back the same way I'm going, and he's going to give me a report, and he might drop me a pin, and he'll do that through OnX, the title sponsor of this hunt, of this day, of this year, of everything I do. The nice thing is, that's what's nice about bird hunters. We share. We may not share the exact. No, you know what though? Honestly, I got friends that'll share the exact area. They're just birds. There's no antlers on them, right? There's no Boone and Crockett for grouse tails or anything like that. And Onyx knows that. And that's why it's so friendly for bird hunters. Gunner Kennels is just as friendly for your dogs. W is where you get your supplies from. Garmin is what you put around your dog's neck if you got an ounce of common sense. Canine Athlete is what you give your dog for supplements. And Wilderness Athlete is what you give yourself for supplements. And you can get 25% off first purchase with the promo code Canine Athlete. Mossberg is where you go when you need a gun that you know is made here, been made here since 1919. I just shot my 940A, got my first duck of the season first duck of this season, got a nice Drake male, that's redundant, got a nice Drake Woody, and I got one goose, all with the same gun, all with the same shells, so put that in your pipe and smoke it. And of course, I shot him with Boss. I shot him with Boss 3.5s. Yes, 3.5s can drop a goose. As long as it's an ethical shot and it's close, it knocked the dickens out of it. In fact, it was dead when it hit the ground. And, of course, my dogs ate Purina Pro Plan all last week, all last month, all last decade. Well, that's all they eat because that's all they need, okay? That's all they need is that's it. It's enough there. Walton's HDP10. If you're getting ready, if you've been pulling the trigger and thinking about, oh, I got to get some stuff for all the birds I'm getting, right? I need a vacuum sealer. I need a chamber sealer. I need a grinder, a stuffer, a buffer, a luffer, a mitten, a knife, whatever you need. Whatever you need, Walton's has got it. Get their catalog. Use HDP10 and get 10% off your purchase at Walton's. Same thing with Marshwear. That's all I wear these days. In fact, my wife right now is hemming. You know, see, do any of you know what hemming is? I bet you some of you are like, what's he talking about? Humming? No, hemming. My wife has a sewing machine because she was also born in the 50s. And she's hemming my overalls. They have some nice hunting overalls. That's what I'm going to be wearing while I go grouse hunting. My Marshwear overalls. You could get them with the promo code HTP15. But if you were a Patreon patron, you could get a bigger discount on Marshwear, Walton's, and Canine Athlete, and Gunner Kennels. So, I mean, I don't know. It's up to you. I'll be packing both of my Arxis boots, okay? Meaning the left one and the right one, the mid-ankle. I've been told on good authority where I'm going. Might be a little wet in the morning, but it ain't going to be, I'm not going to be tromping through a swamp. I'm not going to be crossing any creeks. So I'm not going to bring my old gum leaves from Jack. I'm going to bring my new Arxis, my mid-calf. Oh, yeah. And I will be driving, I'll be driving my Dodge, who does not sponsor this podcast, but bolted to the rails is the four-wheel camper. And that has got everything. It's got my dogs in it. It's got the Gunner Kennel food crate in it. It's got my, I will tell you, this is the absolute truth. I am not shooting a Mossberg this week. Only because I have a favorite little grouse gun with 25-inch barrels, and I haven't found anything in the Mossberg lineup yet. I say yet, okay? But That is probably the only thing that's, you know what? No, I'm going to bring the 940 in case we find some ducks up there because I've already got my waterfowl license. So dummy me, yeah, I'll bring two guns. I'll bring my grouse gun, my little, I don't even want it. I don't want the few remaining out there on the used market to disappear. So I'm just not going to tell you what it is. But all that's going to be packed into my four-wheel camper on top of the box of my Dodge pickup truck. And I will be giving you a report. Probably going to do a podcast, maybe two of them, when I'm up in the UP. If not, we'll talk to you soon. Oh, and I mentioned Patreon, right? We had an absolute, almost educational conversation on the last Zoom room. So think about that. I mean, sometimes they go sideways, sometimes they don't. It just depends on how many patrons come in overserved, so to speak. Anyway, I love you guys. I love you girls. I love you girls more. Can't wait to go grouse hunting. This is going to be my first walk in the Michigan woods, and it's going to be one heck of a walk. Trust me. Yeah. I'll tell you all about it. I'll do a podcast from up there. All right, that's it. That's all I can think of. Bye. All right, as promised, I'm bringing Jordan and Hadassah back on. Hadassah just for a few minutes, and Jordan Engel to talk about everything in Alaska from access to testing to breeding to where to find a dog to the four birds that I can figure out you have if you don't count all your ptarmigan because they're all ptarmigan. So I want to do a deep dive into Alaska because I've been there a lot of times and I've yet to upland hunt. I duck hunted one time on those flats. What was that? The
Chickaloon Flats.
We had intentions of going ptarmigan hunting, but we got snowed out up in the mountains. So we're going to cover everything about Alaska that anybody ever wanted to know. But Hadassah, I'd like you to jump in quick before Jordan and I start yakking away about the film fest.
For sure. Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Ron, for having us on. We really appreciate this. And as you mentioned, the Hunting Dog Film Festival, the submissions are open. And so on our website, huntingdogfilmfestival.com, you can go on there and the submissions are actually being gone through the Film Freeway. And so there's there's a button on there. We also do have the judging process as far as like the guidelines and everything on there posted. So whether you're going to be submitting for the youth category or the amateur or professional, all of that information is on our website. And like I said, submissions are open now up until December 31st of 2024.
All right. So people got to start making some, well, there's a lot of people that have been making stuff too. So yeah. I'm sure, and they might say, "Ooh, let's get some better music behind it. Let's make this a little sexier, whatever." Yeah. But so from now till the end of the year.
Yeah, and recreating that content. I mean, it's content that you maybe have already had, maybe story that you want to redesign, like you said, being able to kind of bring it from a different aspect. There was somebody on our Facebook that had mentioned, it's like, it would have been cool to put this together when we had, Bo, the name of their old dog that passed away already, because he was a great hunting dog. But even those stories can be told, and they can be told through a storyline and still be able to get new content or content you did have together. So there's so many different ways you can take your story, bring it together and submit it through whichever category makes sense.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it's open to all who want to do a little work. Just like a perfect segue in, Alaska's there to bird hunting for those who want to do a lot of work. Right? Yeah. Because Jordan, I want to start with, I want to get a little history. Were you, I don't remember if you were raised up there, if you moved up there, your dog.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was born in Alaska. I was born on the Kenai Peninsula in Soldotna, and I've spent my whole life here. After I got done with high school, I went to school in Anchorage and have always said I was going to move out of Anchorage, but have somehow always ended up roped into the Anchorage region. That's where a lot of the job opportunities in Alaska are based. And so unfortunately, you are oftentimes sort of handcuffed to that sort of major metro area. But grew up hunting, small game, big game, My dad was an avid big game hunter. He was very focused on mountain hunting. My earliest memories of hunting are my dad strapping crampons and ice axes to a backpack to cross glaciers and rope up to get to areas to hunt goats and sheep. I always like to look back on that fondly, thinking about, we've got like the Kuyus and the Sitkas and these companies now that are really pushing this mountain hunting
Yeah.
space. And, I can't say that he invented it, but I mean, I don't know, 1988, 1989, somebody wearing crampons for goats and sheep was pretty was on the edge. So
I
I grew up in a
I wouldn't even go on an icy mountain. I'm just telling you that right now. So I think if they could ever do like a 23andMe and they did the workup on people who were born and raised in Alaska, I don't know what it would show, but I bet it would be some common gene. Like you've got a lot of Neanderthal and you can survive with an ice pick and I don't know what, but um, did you said you small game hunted? Was that just opportunistically as a kid? You went out and took a BB gun first or a 410 or did you
uh,
get into wing shooting?
no, so I grew up that was all with rimfire. So, the 22 long rifle was and I think still is the most popular way to harvest ptarmigan and grouse in Alaska. Um, the upland scene is absolutely developing and is starting to become more and more prevalent. But the I would say I don't have a number to actually prove this, but so we call snowmobiles snow machines in Alaska. So if I say I'll try to use snowmobile, but if I slip it out there, we call them snow machines. But so most people that hunt both hares, we don't have rabbits in Alaska, we have hares, which I'll loop back to here a little bit later when we talk about more versatile dog stuff. But hares and ptarmigan and grouse, I would say mostly is a snow machine and rimfire affair. So a 1022 and a snowmobile is probably how most of the ptarmigan are harvested in Alaska. But with the more and more activity around training dogs and testing dogs, I think it's really brought a lot of emphasis to sort of the traditional upland hunting that is available in Alaska as well. And it's really
Like that lyrical hunting that's written about like on the East, from Robert Rourke and all that. Like people are like understanding like, oh, wing shooting, right? Not shooting them through the wing while they're standing up, right?
exactly. And even it's kind of common that, oh, you grouse hunt. Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, I got one in a tree the other day. So
Yeah.
a tree is also acceptable in Alaska. It doesn't just have to be the ground.
Right. I found that out when I was taking up that 3 hour 2 track up to Chickaloon Flats. I found out, well, those are going to be tasty. The problem is we left them on top of a woodshed and we lost them overnight.
Yeah.
But I was really looking forward to eating those spruce grouse.
Yep. No, absolutely.
I did get one to fly in front of me. I put a stalk on it and I was like, please fly. I want to say that I got one on the wing. And of course, I got it to get up. And of course, I missed it. So,
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the spruce grouse or spruce hen, I know there's some regions, in the lower 48 where you can't hunt them,
right.
but they are very, very prevalent here. They're all over the place. The challenge with the pointing dog, at least, is that I think, evolution has trained the spruce grouse to just pop up to the
Yep.
first limb. We've got lynx, we've got wolves, we've got coyotes, full time. I mean, and their I think primary survival mechanism is just that first limb. And so if you're really looking for that classic point out of a bird dog on a spruce grouse, you have to get really lucky
Right.
because they hold really tight. Your dog's right on top of them, then they pop up to the first limb, and then your dog's either jumping up and down barking at them, or I've seen dogs point them underneath the branch but not figure out that the bird is straight above them.
Right.
And But unfortunately for a lot of dogs, it doesn't take them very long to realize the bird's right there, and then so it is difficult to get a spruce grouse with a classic point and a
Right.
and a, and a shot on the wing. I've had a couple, mostly they're bump birds. With one
Right.
of my dogs, if you didn't shoot bump birds, you'd shoot no birds.
Right.
But
We could
um,
talk about that dog.
but and it's super it's usually the spruce grouse do like to live in the black spruce thickets, the really nasty, low muskeggy kind of swampy stuff. But if you
Yeah.
work through there, you can absolutely get them. And I think sort of like rough grouse in the alders, you just have to shoot through the trees
Right.
and put the shot where the bird will be, regardless of what's between you and the bird. And I've had some good shots that way. It's a great chance to see some cool retrieves too, because your dog has to, may or may not have had really good line of sight to where that bird went down.
And that thick stuff that I saw, and I'm sure a lot of it looks like that because that's their habitat. Yeah, I would say a wing shot in that kind of spruce forest would be tougher than our popple slashings and our cedar thickets. I mean, yeah, once if it didn't stand up or if it didn't just jump up and get on a limb, we saw some that went like, let's say 20 yards in and then got on a limb. And it was like looking for where's Waldo in a puzzle.
Absolutely.
I, and then you try to walk into those woods, and them woods have been falling down on each other for the last 10,000 years, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not easy, but that's probably see, I would guess that would be the most road hunted bird, but when you say snow machines, that's where I could think of the ptarmigan, like
Absolutely.
because of the numbers of ptarmigan, right?
Yep, absolutely. And snowmobiling, snow machining is a huge sport in Alaska. I mean, it's a way of life and it's a transportation mechanism for a huge part of Alaska as well. I
Right.
mean, there's Alaskans who own four-wheelers and snow machines and no car. So there's that element as well. But as people are out recreating, it's sort of opportunistic, I think, for a lot of them. It's, hey, we're here and the ptarmigan are up. So especially the willows. So there's the three main ptarmigan. There's the willow, the rock, and the whitetail, and they all sort of are going to live at a little bit different places. Um, but the willows are the ones. They're sort of the classic covey ptarmigan that you
Mhm.
see, in the tops of the alders and the willows. Because when you think about being up in those valleys in the wintertime, if you see people hunting on snowshoes or skis, you're likely on 10, 12 feet of snow. And so what you're seeing is just the tops of that brush. And they're
Right.
eating those buds and using that as cover and protection from predators.
Yeah. So they act pretty much like our grouse or rough grouse. They in the wintertime they survive on the buds of the willows or whatever else they've got. Like the woods grouse, the um, spruce grouse, if I'm not mistaken, they'll literally live in a tree and eat the needles all winter long, right? That's pretty much their
Yeah, that's one of the things that's, not a biologist, but that's one of the things that does make them super unique,
yeah.
is what they eat in the wintertime. And they're able to digest that and get some caloric value out of that. And it's one of the reasons why sometimes people will talk about a winter spruce hen versus a ptarmigan. The ptarmigan is a much tastier bird
Yeah.
at times. It's a
And
much lighter, much is maybe relative, but it's a lighter meat. You see a winter spruce hen and it's really dark and deep colored meat.
yeah, and it probably could even smell a bit like pine, I would imagine almost, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But when you're going through entrails looking at that, it is, I mean, that's really what's left.
Right, right.
So,
Um, Now I know you have, at least on a map, I'm somewhat in love with pheasants in a weird way because that's what I first started hunting. But I've grown to like shooting sharptails out west because they're pretty easy to hit. I mean, where we hunt, I can't picture, my I hunted Canada one time for sharptails, and it was very wooded and it was very blown over. But the bulk of my sharptail hunting has been done on cattle pastures and prairie and shortgrass prairie. what does that look like for sharptails in Alaska? Where do they hang out?
Yeah, so sharptails they can happen a little further south, and folks that I know and have hunted with have connected with them down here in South Central. Um, but primarily, if you were going to look for a sharptail in Alaska, it would be the interior. So it'd be Fairbanks, it'd be along the Tanana and the Yukon rivers in
Okay.
those areas that are very, very, very wildfire prone. In Alaska, we have sometimes dozens of wildfires burning at any given time in the summer, and we don't try to put them all out either. So those wildfires will ultimately make really great habitat for those sharp tails.
Yeah.
And when you go up to the interior, you can find those spots that either were burned. I don't know the number of years to look for on the map, but those prior burns, there's going to be those spots that they do want to hang.
Yeah.
There's also areas up in the interior around Delta Junction where there's farming and sort of these grain and barley operations. And I know that they'll hang in those areas as well
Sure.
on
Sure.
the edges.
And I guess that we're going to go kind of species by species because we're in Alaska, we're going to run out in two more birds, right? You've got the sooty grouse that,
Which I've never even seen a sooty grouse.
well,
So
I haven't either, but I watched a certain episode with a certain guy by the name of Steve Ranella when he was running around with a 22, listening to him, hoot up in the top of a tree. So I'm taking that right off the wing shooting page, right? I got to feel like if somebody was successful with a pointing dog, it was because they were hunting the wrong time of the year when they were on the ground, I'm guessing. Um, but so and you do have a handful. I don't want to say handful. That's probably I'm not a biologist and I don't know Alaska. You've also have rough grouse up there. You have what we call our rough grouse up there.
absolutely, and a lot of those we have some in South Central. Um, And there's been some historical efforts to actually move and transplant rough grouse. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game has done programs to try to bring them back down to the Kenai Peninsula. Right now, they are again not a biologist, and this isn't my favorite subject necessarily, so I don't just track this every year. But I think the rough grouse population, because of some of the wildfires that we've had and some of the the resurgence of uh, younger trees, right? The willows, the alders, the birch, the things like that in the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, which is South Central. I think we are seeing more rough grouse around there, but interior bird for sure. If you really wanted to target rough grouse, that's going to be an interior trip.
Right.
So kind of in that Fairbanks, again, a little bit the Tanana, Yukon areas, which, one, it's a drive for folks from South Central, but a really great opportunity. I've hunted up there with folks. There's well, I don't know, a pretty well-known Droughthaar breeder up there, Tom St. Clair, and he's really involved with the VDD system. And I've had the opportunity to go hunt with him, and really a wonderful area. When you're used to just Anchorage or the spruce swamps, those sort of rolling mountains and hills in the interior are just wonderful.
And almost easy to a point compared to other
Well,
things.
yeah, absolutely, because that's one of the areas, that area for grouse, for rough grouse, is something where you can drive, park your car, get out, and run your dog for 90 minutes and come back to the truck.
Right.
Where in South Central hunting ptarmigan, you're parking and maybe hiking for 2 or 3 hours to
Ooh,
get into the valley where the ptarmigan are.
right.
And I mean, you can have a fat dog worn out just getting to where the ptarmigan are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that kind of grouse hunting sounds like what we do here in Michigan. We go to a spot, we walk for it depends, could be 30 minutes, could be 2 hours, and let's go check another cover. Let's go check another.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's
got a little bit. You got the challenging stuff, and you've got like what we would call the normal stuff. As long as we're not talking snow machines and Ruger
yeah,
10-2s.
yeah. No, and so that area, is still unfortunately for those of us who live in South Central, I mean that's a 6-hour drive from Anchorage, pretty easy.
Yeah.
Where does 6 hours get you, just for reference? If you started and drove 6 hours nonstop.
6 hours would get me to the bottom of Indiana, mid bottom of Illinois, of neither which have any birds to shoot. It could get me up and over the bridge, where I could be in grouse and woodcock country. Um, but it's all pretty fast driving. Like, I don't know. I mean, Alaska doesn't really have an interstate system to speak of, right?
Yeah. Well, and our roads unfortunately aren't 75, 80 mile an hour roads either.
No, no,
But um, so it is a commitment to get up there if you're in South Central area.
yeah,
And the you mentioned it earlier, and it's something that is very real for us. We have a super long season for bird hunting. It goes all the way into next year, literally.
right,
Um,
right.
but a lot of that season is sort of burnt up by either darkness or other sort of regional challenges. Just on the rough grouse side, trapping in the interior opens up. I believe it's November 1st, but it might be October 1st. And once you start, I mean, those woods that you're looking for grouse are also woods where you're going to see active trap line, signs posted on trees,
And that's going to be
and
a lot of snares. And
lots of snares.
yeah,
And so that brings up sort of its own unique set of challenges. There's going to be, I'm not a trapper. So I don't know everything about it, but I've come across sets in the wintertime where they're literally using ptarmigan wings as that attractant and part of the bait to get a fur bearer into a trap.
like a
So
lynx or a coyote or
exactly. And some dogs, I mean, there's obviously not a bird attached to it, but that wing alone might be enough to get my dog Harper straight into a snare.
yeah, yeah. I would.
So it's something to contend with and think about in Alaska. So it may change your timing on when
So
and how you can get out and hunt those birds in the interior.
so as long as the season is, like I said, between weather and trapping, it's not like you're going to go out to 120 days and go ptarmigan hunting. You're kind of dependent on weather and, like you said, daylight. That's a whole nother, you know, like that's a whole nother thing that I can't even get my head around. And I've been up to Alaska a lot in the summertime, which is wonderful, right? You know, I can't even picture if you did want to make a December, January hunt somewhere for what do you have? Like twilight? Are you working at like a twilight kind of light for that?
Yeah, and that's one of the big challenges during that January, even February. February is starting to get a little bit more doable,
Sure.
but um, if we're talking about ptarmigan, which would be kind of our primary bird in the wintertime, we're talking about a few. The driving in the dark's not a problem, but we're talking about sunrise at maybe 10, and sun's
Yeah.
going down really hard by 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we've got 2 hours of, what I'll call the approach, just getting to the valley where the birds are going to be,
Right.
I mean, that gives you an hour.
That's so
So
so the dog people in Alaska are just as goofy as all the people in Alaska. Like this is not for the sissies.
it,
This is not
it,
for
it
fair weather hunters either. You gotta strike out when the striking's good.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
I mean, even when you're an absolute diehard, it's challenging some days to,
No.
to say, oh, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to hike 3.5 hours, I'm going to be soaking wet. Um, and some days you get into birds, some days you don't.
Yeah.
So
It is there. I don't mean this to be a softball question, but if as a resident, I would assume you found some spots you're like, oh, you know what? I've only got so much time. This is way more doable than I just described, right? I mean, every one of them can't be a 3-hour hike to a valley. Like, or
no, there's definitely places. Um, but one of the things that's also kind of unique about Alaska, we have a lot of public land, which is great,
yeah,
which offers you the opportunity to hunt. You can't say everywhere, but in the lower 48, I've been places where it's 99% private.
oh yeah, Yeah.
And we're in Alaska, I would say almost without fail, you could probably stop your car somewhere outside of a town and you're allowed to hunt there.
Right.
That,
It's
that would
pretty
be a fair guess.
right.
This
You'd
isn't
be
a
right
knock. I
more
mean,
times than you'd be wrong.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an Onyx subscriber, but I'll be honest, you don't really need Onyx. Sorry, Onyx. You don't really need Onyx in Alaska. You can probably hunt there.
Right.
Um, but the there's still, you know, plenty of places that you do have to be considerate of. So you know, we've got areas just behind Anchorage that have ptarmigan. You can find all sorts of ptarmigan, but they're hiking trails, you know, where people are walking their labradoodles in
Yeah.
harnesses.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, you know, that's not really in closed areas. We've got a lot of military areas in Alaska that are close to where we might say, oh, that'd be an easy place to access birds.
Yeah.
So um, so you do have some areas that are going to be easy to get to and easy to hunt. Um, you know, one of the things that, you know, I know me and some of my friends up here like to do in the wintertime, especially, you know, again, this is maybe an English setter wouldn't be all that into that, but you know, we like to hunt hares in the wintertime. That's something we can get to easy.
Yeah.
And you know, you can get your dog out on a Saturday morning and really have a great morning, whether that's on, you know, snowshoes or, you know, there's groups of folks that you know, are really starting to get into the backcountry skiing element as sort of a logistics piece. You know, I
Mhm.
think some of those folks started out as skiers and they're adult onset hunters maybe,
Yeah.
and so they've gotten into the bird dog scene, they've gotten into the shotgun scene, and skis are a much faster way to get around in that kind of terrain than snowshoes. And so it's a very small little niche, and it's super cool to see, you know, the Instagram pictures and the
You could see somebody literally on a pair of cross-country skis, shotgun and dog.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm sure somebody's done it here, but I don't know anybody who's done it here. I bought a pair of snowshoes once, and I did realize that was better than walking in the snow. Walking on the snow is a lot better, but that exhausted me. You know, you,
Yeah.
I believe that anybody who bird hunts in Alaska must have a stairmaster in their, you know, like in the back room or the garage, just to keep the legs going. You know what? I mean, there's really, like I said, I've been up there a lot of times. It's always been a tough hunt. Like whether it was the duck hunt or a caribou hunt on the north slope, you know, of I went up the Hall Road and shot a couple caribou. Everything about that trip, the drive was hard. Dragging the canoes 5 miles away from the pipeline was hard, and watching out for bears was hard. Like
Yeah.
I have yet to have an experience in Alaska that makes me want to come back, except to go to the fish shack, knock a few nails into a board, build a new outhouse, and get some free halibut. I mean, that's my extent. But I know friends of mine that have gone. I know a couple of them that flew their dogs up there because they had to go see it. Right?
Yeah.
Is that is that a fool's errand, or is that something that people could really do?
No, you
I know
absolutely
they do
could.
it. I know they do it, but I mean,
Yeah. No, you absolutely could. You I think maybe more than some places, you might need to reach out to somebody that's local or somebody that's been there, done that,
yeah,
uh, just for a little bit of ideas. You know, I mean, I could look at you know, just go back 10, what is it, 5 minutes, you know, someplace like Nebraska or South Dakota. I mean, Onyx indispensable. You can get on there, you can find those spots, find those, you know, find those marshy areas, find those little streams, find those waterways. It's like, man, we can clobber some pheasants in that.
right.
Up here, you may not be able to do that without somebody kind of poking you in the right direction and kind of helping with that. But I think Alaska can be a destination for folks, and especially if they had reason to be here otherwise. You know, if uh, you know, Alaska Airlines will fly your dog for $100, and it's easy to get your dog up here. And once you're here, it's easy to find folks that are going to be interested in helping you too. That's one thing I think with Alaska because we've got so much public land, there's not these little pockets of, there's no, there's no secret spots hardly anymore.
Right, right,
And there's also so much public land that you're not dependent upon the relationship with a landowner to get access to some place
right.
that's got good bird habitat.
So you're more dependent on getting some good intel from somebody up there, and then you could strike out on your own if you.
Yeah, absolutely. But
Yeah,
it is, and I said this the other day when we were on, it's a logistical,
yeah,
the crux is the logistics. It's not so much the birds.
right,
We've got massive amounts of waterfowl. We've got massive amounts of ptarmigan. It's getting to the ducks. It's getting to,
yeah,
where the ptarmigan are going to live. It's getting to Fairbanks. It's all
right,
of those things that make it a challenge,
yeah,
and it makes it challenging to get your dog out into some of those spots. And because of those logistical challenges, the easy spots are really, really full.
right.
I've been in places that were, I'll say close to Anchorage relative,
Yeah.
and I'm coming through the willows. I'm sloshing through the water. I've got my younger dog Aspen with me. I look up and there's a NABDA chapter member there, and I'm like, oh, there's
Hey,
him.
hey,
And so
Bob.
we walk over there, and then he rattles off about 7 more people I know that are in the same valley, and I was like, oh, perfect.
Good. I haven't seen him in a while. I missed him the
Yeah.
last training day. Well,
So
let's segue into that a little bit. I remember and I don't remember the date. You might, but I remember the first couple judges that got shipped up to Alaska to judge a NAVDA test, and a lot of us were like, Alaska, a NAVDA test, right? Like they don't you don't do that there, right? When did it start getting a chapter together and stuff? Whether you were there in the beginning or not, I don't know.
Well, so I wasn't there at the beginning, but there was Great Land NAVDA was the first chapter that I'm aware of that started here, and that sort of morphed and evolved. I think that was, I mean, it was over 10 years ago,
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
maybe 15 years ago. I mean, absolutely don't hold me to that one.
right.
Um, but that chapter morphed and evolved into Alaska Yukon NAVDA, which has been around for a very long time.
Yep.
And and now there's even more chapters. Northern Lights NAVDA is up here now. They're also South Central based. And there's I know very little about this one, but 60 North is actually peninsula based now. So we've got 3 NAVDA chapters that are testing versatile dogs. So that's an incredible resource for dog owners and upland hunters, or
Sure.
waterfowlers who are looking for a trained retrieve class. So even if you're kind of more focused on the waterfowl duck scene, still an incredible resource.
That would
And
be the stepping stone. If you're a NAVDA member, you reach out through the directory to another NAVDA member. I mean,
absolutely,
that goes back
absolutely, and
to,
that's
it's like the Masons in the United States. You had a couple, you wore a ring and you could get anywhere, as long as you guys were like-minded.
absolutely, and I think that there's also a big VDD scene for the Deutsch Drahars. Big scene there. We've got several folks who are breeding Drahthaars up here, and that scene has really, really exploded in the last couple of years. And that would be another resource for folks, if they're into Kurtzars or Drahthaars,
Right.
run through that member list if you're looking to come up and hunt. And there's going to be people on there who are going to be, super willing to help you out and get you pointed in the right direction, if not just flat take you out,
Yeah.
out in the woods.
Yeah. So let's chat about that a little bit. It's kind of one thing to say you got a NAVDA chapter because that is such a bigger organization, but yet VDD is much older and it's in a lot of pockets of the lower 48. So Alaska even has an active VDD chapter with, do they have enough judges up there? Or do they have to bring those in like?
So I think we have 2 judges now.
Okay.
But the VDD typically brings up in all the tests that I've been in, which I've been in, not what have I been in? I've been in 3 or 4 years of VDD tests in running one test or another, whether that's a VJP or an HCP.
Yeah.
Um, but they typically fly up 6 or 7 judges, and we've
Wow.
just recently got, I think we have two actual approved judges now in the VDD system, so that lowers that number down a little bit. Um, and that's one of the challenges for running tests, whether that's NAVDA or VDD in Alaska, is the availability of judges and
Yeah.
then the cost to get them there. You've come up and you've done that and you've seen that.
Yeah.
It's a plane ticket that's probably $1,000.
Hmm.
It's hotels, it's rental cars, it's all the sort of stuff that you would do for a normal judge, except they can't drive an hour to get to your test.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then I think of like I'm kind of jumping here because we'll probably go back to some of that. You got your training days to think about, right? Like every chapter has some training days. You got to find probably finding the right area is probably not. You can find if you just needed 100 acres in Alaska, fine, but it doesn't mean it's a good spot to train your dog, right?
Absolutely.
And then you've got to find the water and you've got to find this. I mean, what a challenge. I mean, it
It,
really is a challenge.
it is, and the locations are challenging. And like you said, we've got for all the space we have, finding areas that you can actually sort of dial in for an event, whether that's a VDD test or a NAVDA test.
Yeah.
Um, it is challenging. I would say number one challenge though is bird availability.
Oh,
That's
yeah. I didn't even, yeah, just the
that's
training birds.
that's the I think the number one challenge for Alaskan upland hunters is having enough bird contact in the off season to have a successful season. And that
Yeah.
bird contact is super expensive or
Yeah.
a lot of work. What one or the other. For our test birds, we pay, it ends up being after we Alaska air cargo them to Alaska, we end up paying sometimes north of $20 a bird.
For a chucker?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so when you're talking about, hey, and we can only usually do that once or twice a year. I mean, between the different chapters,
Yeah.
uh, that I believe they try to coordinate so that we can maybe have some availability throughout. We've also got a AKC Arctic Bird Dog is up here. They're AKC affiliated, so they do a bird order once a year. Um, no surprise, but all these chapters are cross-membered.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
to the hilt.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's super normal. Hey, well, Arctic Bird Dog's going to have their bird order here. Alaska Yukon will have theirs here. Northern Lights NAVDA is going to have their bird order here. So maybe you can kind of stagger that. But bird availability, very, very challenging. And so with the locations to train, it's, I mean, do I have $100 today to watch some birds fly off for my pup?
Right.
And then
Right.
do I have $100 tomorrow to watch
Right.
birds fly off for my pup? And then
Right.
so it ends up being, very difficult. I mean, obviously, in the dog training scene, pigeons, right? That works great. Um, Likely those of us who are looking to train a dog, even though I have space to put pigeons here, I'm going to drive 90 minutes or more to where I'm going to actually train. And so
Right.
then you've got, I mean, they'll come the 90 minutes, right? The pigeons don't have a problem with that if you train them and they're actually homing stock, not just
Yeah.
trash
Not the city
pigeons.
pigeons. Yeah.
But then you've got goshawks. You've
Oh,
got, I mean, so now that's challenging on your loft is, okay, we're flying our birds an hour from home and they're getting knocked out by goshawks on the way back. So, it's doable. It's absolutely doable, but it does really separate you know, the
the wheat
uh,
from the shaft.
the wheat from the chaff. Absolutely, the guys who have really, really, really successful, really steady dogs, they put in the time, they put in the miles on their car, and
And the money.
unfortunately, they've put in the funds to make it happen.
So to say that old analogy, the cheapest thing you're going to spend on your dog is the price of the pup. could not be more true in Alaska. I think,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, the miles you put on your car, the price of the birds, then if you want to travel somewhere, I mean, we had several folks last year go down to the Invitational. That's a financial commitment for Alaskans to take a dog through all the levels of testing.
yeah.
I mean, it would be a fun napkin budget to go through real quick. You know
They
what?
probably really don't want to know the budget. They
You,
probably
you
that's
well,
like
there if
that's like
if they
finding out how much my wife actually spends on Amazon. I really don't want to know. Just
well,
let
that's what I was just gonna say was if they didn't want to know, their wives certainly don't.
don't. Yeah.
But I will say one thing just on that note is we've got some exceptional women handlers and hunters up here who have really put in the time and the work into some dogs, which I can't really speak to the NAVDA scenes or VDD scenes in other states. I'm not
Mhm.
very fluent in them, but um, sometimes, I mean, those are some of our most committed, most dedicated members when it comes to volunteering, when it comes to the dogs, when it comes to training days. You know, I mean, the buddies that I'll hunt with might make every other training day,
Right.
but that core group of women who are really, really, really dedicated, they show up at every training day. They're
Right.
buying birds every opportunity. They're showing up at every training day. Some of them, where Seward's at relative to Anchorage. But
Mhm.
for those who might not, it's about a hour and a half to 2 hour drive from Anchorage to Seward. Our training days in South Central are about an hour away from Anchorage. So they're driving 3+ hours for a training day,
For training
each
day.
direction.
Jeez. Yes.
And so
Yeah, there's
some
a couple spots in the country like Montana that you'll get those kind of mileage, but we're so blessed in like Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, the East. Like you could just go to another chapter that's an hour away, right? Yeah, you don't have to talk about a cross country drive to train your dog here.
yeah,
What a chore.
but that time has paid off for a lot of them. And like I said, I mean, we had folks, prize one dogs that ended up, going to the invitational, and some of them doing very, very well. So it is doable. It's very doable. We've got Elijah Barber. He's a friend of mine. He's here in South Central Alaska. He's got a semi-new litter. I guess it was last year because they HCP'd this fall, but litter of Drothars. He absolutely is another person who's just put in an amazing amount of time to get the results,
Right.
and it shows,
Yeah.
and when you see the miles, the dollars, the amount of time and the passion, and then you see, prize one dogs just back to back to back, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it really does. And then you see the folks who kind of casually trained a dog and kind of casually, wanted to see the results. And it
Yeah.
shows up in hunting season too.
Yeah.
That's the big one.
I want to say to the comment about the women, like when I started NAVDA, I don't remember the first time I saw, well, there was some women judges that were judges well before me, but there wasn't many women participants. And it was mostly guys. And I would have just guessed that it would have took Alaska longer to make that curve, but it doesn't sound like the women jumped right in and said, thank you for doing like this
Well,
what
and
yeah.
yeah, and in a lot of cases, they're the chapter leadership. I
Mhm.
mean, so and we've got folks who just are really, 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 and I think it comes back to the dogs, right? It comes back to um, they're passionate about their dogs, their
Yeah.
breeds, and sort of making a mark in that space. We've got a Munsterlander, a large Munsterlander scene in Alaska that goes back many, many years and started up in the interior and has worked its way sort of through the state. And so we've got, the Munsterlander folks are really, really passionate about their dogs. The Drahar folks, how do you know they're Drahar folks? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
I'll tell you.
Um,
Yeah.
the
They'll correct you when you say wire hair.
yeah. Um, the Drahar folks are absolutely rabid up here. I mean, bad pun, but I mean
Mhm.
they're into the Drahars, they want to see the Drahars succeed. They want to see them work. We've got the short hairs, we've got small Munsterlanders. The versatile dogs really take hold up here when you're talking about, the kind of common bird dog. We
Yeah,
have labs, we've got duck hunters,
sure.
but you see a lot of versatile dogs out and about. When you hit the boat launch on opening day of duck season, I bet you see as many versatile dogs as you see labs getting into those John boats. So
And I bet that's not historically true in Alaska, right? I mean, the lab's been everywhere people have. So, but you kind of wonder, like, where was the first boat launch where the guys with the lab saw the guy with the dog with the beard, right? You're like, what,
well,
what are you
um,
doing with this pointing dog on your John boat? But as we know what
yeah,
we know what
no.
they
So
do.
in Alaska, and I'm sure there's somebody that the Drothar historians, I'm sure will correct me, but um, Don Litzau he was big in the NAVDA chapters here in South Central. He was really, really, I'll say, a mentor to me and really helped me out when I got a Drothar, and I was like, man, what do I do with this thing?
Right.
So he shepherded a lot of folks down the path with the versatile dogs. But I think honestly, I bet if you went back in time, I bet Don was one of those first guys that showed
Probably.
up with, you know, uh, uh, kind of the shaggier big F Drahar at the boat launch that's 90 pounds and like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, we know they can do a good job, so that's not even an issue. But yeah, it's just the lineage of is the lineage of the versatile dog in Alaska is still, like you said, there was probably, you could probably keep digging back if the information was there. You'd find another one, and then you'd find another one, but it wouldn't be like a thing until I think the testing and the training came up in
Yeah.
that organizational side of it. Somebody probably had a small Munsterlander up there in 1959 when you got the license plate, but
Yeah.
that was probably one small Munsterlander in Alaska.
Yeah. Um, and I think that's, what you'll see, because, when I was first starting to get into the versatile dog scene, I worked with somebody who had small Munsterlanders,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still involved with NAVDA now, but um, I was like, what the heck's a small Munsterlander?
Right.
And then, the origins of me having Drahthaars was a different coworker in a different place saying, oh yeah, we've got a Deutsch Drahthaar, and I was like, oh, what?
So
And
had you had a dog before that encounter?
well, that's the part of the fun of me and my versatile dog journey, is that I have never owned a dog until I owned a Drahthaar,
Oh,
and
thanks.
that was a steep hill to climb.
Wait a minute. Do
But
you have porcupines in Alaska?
uh-huh.
Okay, now I can see. All right, now we can start from there.
No, absolutely. The so that was a steep learning curve for me getting into the Drahars, but um, I will say, I still don't know of a better dog for Alaska to be able to hunt hares, to be able to waterfowl hunt in big, nasty, cold water, to
Right.
be able to point ptarmigan. And, we've got guys up here, just uh, Mike Harris. He's big in bow hunting. He's big in the bow hunting community up here. He tracks all sorts of big game with his Draghar.
Right.
He's got more than one, but so he is absolutely a picture of the Draghar from A to Z.
Right.
Hares, pointing, waterfowl, tracking, um,
Yeah.
and those dogs go everywhere. And it's like, man, you are literally the picture perfect Drahar owner here, running
In that
all of that.
respect, Alaska is the perfect place for it,
It
except
is.
of all the logistics of the training and the birds.
Yeah, aside from that, but that's it's more a testament to all of the versatile dogs, though, because all of them have that, say, capability, right? We
Yeah.
do tracks, we do drags,
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, you could have a, you know, I mean, a sort of what I kind of think of the non-traditional versatile dogs, right? You know, a setter or something, you know, I mean, those dogs
Right.
can hang too. Um, but the uh, the ability to use your dog that many days in that many ways, I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. And, you know, I think the Drahar specifically, not to toot that horn, but with maybe a little more rugged coat, maybe with a little more cold tolerance or hard-headedness. You
Uh,
know,
that kind
my
of
dog
goes,
Harper,
it goes
yeah,
hand in hand.
my dog Harper is not overly coated.
Hmm.
You know, he looks more like a short hair than he does a Drahar, but he's so hard-headed that he will stand out there just shivering his ass off.
Right.
I mean, last year we were in one spot and he was tired of sitting in the canoe, which is a Harper thing to do, you know, and so he's sitting up to his neck in the water waiting for a retrieve, just shaking, shivering, but he'll do it.
But if you get him to speak English, what he'd tell you, Jordan, he goes like, I'm not shivering. I'm flexing my muscles to keep them warm.
Okay.
He'd be like doing like peck bounces. This is what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's just like going, watch me, watch me. Oh,
But
man.
he's a, you know, he's a character in a lot of different ways, not all of them good. Um, but you know, that's what it takes sometimes, I think, up here. You know, we ask a lot of the
Yeah.
dogs. We've got folks up here who go out and they'll hunt sea ducks, and we're talking about cold water, big water, tide swings that are some of the biggest anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so dogs are swimming against current, they're swimming against tide. You know, we've got folks that make annual trips out to Cold Bay, Alaska, which is out headed towards closer to Russia than it is to Canada. Um, and you know, these folks are running their dogs on waterfowl and, you know, geese and things like that in conditions that would make a Chesapeake Bay retriever blush. I mean, you know,
Right.
so it's
Yeah. Well, maybe Chessie owners aren't tough enough to come up there. Their dogs are tough, but maybe they're not tough enough. But I know we have friends here that had, well, they happened to be short hairs and they were wire hairs, but a couple of them were in the Kurtzar Club, and one of their dogs, they went out to what's called the arms of Muskegon Lake. It goes out to Lake Michigan, and you can do some really good diver hunting right there on these rocks. They got these huge rock arms, right? You can walk out there and set up your decoys. Doesn't take a lot. And I remember his dog, it was his wire hair, and he was sitting there long enough to where his coat on his basically his butt, tail, and groin refroze to the rocks. And duck went down, dog went and got the duck. And you looked on the rock, and there was like a toupee. And it didn't stop that dog one bit, you know. So yeah, they are tough. And you know, they're high desire. You have to have high desire to to do that. And I would imagine, like I said, anything up there that's bred and hunted up there is I shouldn't say tougher than ours, but they're going to be challenged more than our dogs are going to be challenged.
yeah, no, absolutely. And this is certainly not, I'm not an expert in this at all, but, you know, one of the things that I have seen that is challenging for the folks who are looking to breed, you know, whether that's in line with, you know, NAVDA test results or VDD test results, is actually availability of dogs, you know,
Yeah.
dogs that are tested to the standard. We have a pretty small pool of dogs that are really tested to that level and to that standard.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, we're talking about, you know, flying dogs to be bred.
Yeah.
So it is a limiting factor sometimes for, I think, some of the dogs up here that really do have the drive and the desire and the characteristics that you want to see, the capability and the proof on paper, um, actually creating more of those.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually one thing that's a little bit challenging, but I do think that when, you know, and I don't know how much that carries through. That's like I said, I'm not an expert in that, but when your dog grows up in an environment like this and it's normal to wade through and swim uphill through snow to hunt birds,
Right.
you get a few generations of that. I'd like to think at some point that
Yeah.
becomes
It has to make a difference. It has
eh,
to. And the ones that don't make it don't get it's like the best of the best, but it's just another level up there. But yeah, that whole, that's something that would probably take a whole nother podcast to get on all. I'd love to talk to all the breeders in Alaska, like all four of them. I know there's more than four, but it's almost a little incestuous. They
yeah.
all, they have to know each other, right? They're in the same.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, oh, what I'm trying to think if I can just pull one right here. Four, I mean, there's four or five folks that have Draghars that are, eligible to breed, and then you'd
Right.
want to. Um, you get into the Nabdicide, and you've got some dogs that would be really good and have good test scores. But I mean, we're talking about one hand.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
um, I mean, and I guess I should clarify that. And we're talking one hand per breed.
Right.
I mean, of dogs that would really,
Right.
one of the folks up here who's a NAVDA judge has a really amazing short hair. We've got other short hairs that have really great test results. But
Right.
again, I mean, you've got the running buddy short hairs and you've got hunting short hairs.
Right.
And the hunting short hairs category, just like all of the dogs, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
ones who can't find their food bowl versus the ones who could literally spend 14 hours.
The ones that could fill their food bowl.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I can't let this go without talking about my fear of wolves and bears and mountain lions and things like that. Now, I was up in the UP a couple of years ago, and I had my little Cocker Spaniel on the ground, and to my knowledge, I'm sure somebody has lost a bird dog to a wolf, let's say, up here. I don't know of any. Now the bear hunters for sure, those dogs are striking way out into the forest and they're getting into territories and they're getting killed. But I'm guessing I never hear anybody talk about a fear of wolves and bears when they live in Alaska. And it's not because they went to school with you. I mean, you didn't have like, oh yeah, in the next class are the remedial bears, right? But I'm assuming it's because they are still hunted on uh, a seasonal basis. They're all into regs, right? Does do you have any worries with that with your dogs, with the bears and the wolves?
No,
And not
so
just
I,
because you have Draghars.
well, no, I mean, that's what a Drahar owner is supposed to say, right?
Right, right, right.
But no, in a word, and what I see mostly, and I have, I mean, my family's from Wisconsin. I've got family who's in the, Wisconsin Bear Hunters Association and running
Okay.
hounds and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, the fact that we're not treeing and asking our dogs to post up for an hour while we figure out how to get there.
Right.
Um, our dogs are going to be within a few hundred yards probably of us most of the time.
Right.
Um, but mostly it's a habitat thing. Our density per square mile of those types of animals, I
Yeah.
think, are lower because they've got so much space. So,
Gotcha.
the town I grew up in Kenai, Soldotna, if you drove the right road at the right time of day, you can see a wolf, you can see a coyote. Um, you know, they'll cross the road, they'll run. But they don't need to be right next to you. They're not next to your houses, they're not next to your homes.
Right.
We live in Anchorage, on the east side of Anchorage, not too far from the mountains, next to a big park, just 65 yards that way.
Yeah.
Um, we've had four black bears on our porch. That was a mom and three cubs literally on my porch eating dog food that I left out. um, you're not supposed to do that, but
No, I found that out when I was in Montana one time and I left dog food in the back of my truck and got a big fat ticket.
but I opened the front door, and honestly, I think could also open the door and threw a trash bag out there at him without knowing it in the dark. And so I get out there and I'm taking Harper out to take a leak. I open the door. He goes nuts. I slam the door. I was like, that's the last thing we need is him running bears across Anchorage.
Yeah.
Um, but they have so much area and space that they don't typically, unless you give them a reason to,
Right.
you don't typically have interactions. Harper and I were up on the Denali Highway, which is a road that really connects our two main roads north,
Right.
and is a popular area to bird hunt. It's a popular area to hunt everything, unfortunately, which means it gets a lot of traffic during hunting season.
Hmm.
But and we ran into a black bear that was moving through the willows. It might have been the only time Harper came when I called him, but he started barking his head off, freaking out. He actually came back, and I was kind of up on a little knoll and was able to look down and watch this. And I got a leash on Harper, but was able to watch this black bear sort of scurry his way underneath us and just kind of went up and kept moving. But I mean, those kind of interactions,
They're
I think,
probably way more dense in the lower 48 then, really, than it is up there.
and I'm not sure that it's dense because I'm sure our numbers are higher without, again, not a biologist. I'm sure our numbers are higher. It's just we have more space for them to be. So I
Right.
think the
Right.
conflict with them is lower.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm sure there's people who've had the conflicts, and I'm certain if you were in the right spot or the wrong spot at the wrong time, you could find brown bears, right? I mean, there's brown bears cruising around the Kenai River during the salmon runs. And if
Right.
you went and walked your dog up and down there, at some point, you're probably going to see a brown bear.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's being a little bit intelligent, and we don't have a reason to, really be bird hunting in those same areas. So
Right. Right.
I think that keeps a lot of those interactions down. And one tidbit that's always kind of thrown around about Alaska, is that moose kill more humans than bears do. And statistically, that's, I believe, still true. And it's because we're in closer proximity to the moose. The moose will
Right.
come through our towns. The moose, there's unfortunately videos of people, at the college or, out by the airport or, having interactions with moose that end up being dangerous, if not deadly, because the moose are right there. And we sort of take them for granted as big, dumb animals. And, actually, I've, on the same vein, I mean, I've had more problems with moose and my dogs than bears and my dogs.
Wow.
I've had to take Harper to the vet, getting stomped on by a moose.
Oh,
And
Jesus, really?
yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it was a weird scenario. And it was kind of when you look back and you, man, I feel like I should have done that different, but I don't know how. We were actually out and we were in the springtime, and our roads and our trails turn into moose pathways because they're tired of standing up to their nuts in the snow. So when you've
Right.
got a hard spot that they can, one, move on and not punch all the way through, they gravitate towards them.
Right.
So it becomes, there's more conflict the later you go into the winter because the moose start getting closer and closer to the paved areas, closer and closer to the spaces that are easy to access food. But we were out, Harper was out in front of me, and a moose steps out, and Harper's probably 75 yards up, kind of scooting around up there. And um, if I would have said nothing, Harper probably would have kept going. But the moose just came out and stopped right in the middle of the trail. And he kind of starts coming back. And I honestly think he thought it was a horse, which he
Huh.
doesn't have a thing with horses. He's seen horses. We don't have a lot of horses in Alaska, but one of the places that we train down on the peninsula, they've got horses, and my dogs have seen them,
Yeah.
uh, and they ignore them for the most
Right.
part.
Right.
I honestly think he thought it was a horse. I mean, maybe I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure he knows it smelled different, but um, I should have just downed him or something. But I was like, I called to him, and he just came back, and he just walked right underneath the moose. And
Jesus.
he didn't bark. He wasn't freaking out, and he doesn't. I mean, even today, he doesn't bark at moose. He doesn't, but he came down the trail, and the moose is standing broadside to me, perpendicular to the trail, and he just kind of stops right under the moose, and he's like, maybe I'll just come under here. And the moose turns around and starts stomping him with his two front feet.
Oh,
And so he's yelping and squealing, and so I'm screaming at him, which isn't uncommon, but trying to get him to come towards me. And he ended up, I mean, he wouldn't even jump into the truck when we finally I kind of carried him back to the truck, and his like back end, I think it was a nerve thing or something, but
Like taking a
We
bad
ended up
hit as a football player on a field. Like he took a bad hit to the
yeah,
back.
yeah.
Wow.
And so anyway, I mean, he was fine, but one of the things that was interesting was the vet had said that, the his summary of why that was maybe not as bad as it could have been was because we were on sort of softer ground, softer snow. And he said
Yeah.
if you were on a road and the hooves of the moose, which are that big around,
Oh,
big as my face, then they're pinching and they're cutting and they're
right,
breaking
right.
between a harder surface and the moose. And because we were in the snow, his summation was that the dog sort of just got more pushed into the snow, and that sort of kept him from,
Oh,
so he was on Remedil for a while and kind of hobbled around for a bit. But, I mean, honestly, between the bear and the moose, I guess I'll take the bear.
yeah, me too, I guess. My God. I had a horse run me off of a sharp tail hunt one time. I'm like I said, I'm really not meant for this. Like you have not said anything that's gonna make me move to Alaska. If I could do a do-over, it's like, hey, if I could be in an alternate universe, I wonder if I'd be born in Alaska. I'm like, no, you got to remember, you're afraid of horses, you're afraid of bears, you're afraid of wolves, probably not. But then again, maybe I would have acclimated to it. But yeah, moose. I came back from a caribou hunt with Steve and Danny years ago, like 15, 16 years ago. And Danny lived right in Anchorage, not far from downtown in this little house with a backyard. And everybody had like stockade wooden fences around the back of the house. And I thought, well, that's nice. You got a privacy fence. He said, no, it keeps the moose out. And I'm like, come on. And I literally got up before everybody else and I wanted to go find a coffee. Everybody was sleeping. And I walked down the street, found a little place to get a cup of coffee. As I'm coming back down the alley to Danny's house, there's a cow moose standing in the alley. And it might as well have been a werewolf to me. I mean, it wasn't even looking at me. I just saw it and I backpedaled up all the way back to the street and I went to Danny's house on the hardtop on the strand, not going in the alley. Like the moose are in the alleys. Oh, no. Mm-mm.
Well, and the crazy thing about the moose too is they're a little more nimble than they look. They're not as bright as you think they should be,
Yeah.
but they are more nimble than they look. In my When I was a lot younger, I worked for it's almost unknown up here, but I worked for the USDA and I worked for Wildlife Services. Um, and one of the big things that Wildlife Services under the USDA does up here in Alaska is help with um, sort of the risk management of migrating wildfowl and waterfowl at airports.
Oh,
So to help lower the risk of bird strikes at our big airports. That's up in Prudhoe Bay. We've got flights daily landing up there. Massive, massive amounts of hazing and harassment that goes on to try to keep those
wow.
airports clear. The birds will come out and sit. So when I worked for USDA here in Anchorage, one of the things that we ended up doing was moving moose around sometimes. And I've watched them jump a 6 or 7 foot fence with enough pressure, trying to get them out of an airport, with we've got big fences around it. And you're pressuring them, pressuring them, pressuring them, and eventually they'll go up and over the fence. And I wouldn't have believed it. But you can find pictures and videos of it now of moose jumping pretty tall fences. But it's
Wow.
goofy as hell. But but they do it.
Oh, well, like I said, I don't know if we turned anybody on to coming up to visit you up in Alaska or not. But I've never had anybody, Ken that lives down in
Oh yeah.
we had talks, but it always turned into something else about going to a bar, or, I mean, and I've never had all these questions, about hunting up there because there is something about wing shooting. I don't have a bucket list of the birds. Like I've got friends that want to get every bird with their dog. They got to get it shot. They got to get it pointed. Um, but I am like, a bucket list for me is a destination, to go somewhere to hunt that I haven't hunted before. And I think that's attractive,
Yeah.
So I might say, find me one of them close places. I'll fly up.
You got one more Alaska trip in you, Ron?
Oh yeah, yeah, I got one more. As long as I don't have to go to that damn fish shack off of out of what do you call it down there? Oh, where does everybody go down southeast? Ketchikan. As long as I don't
Oh,
have to fly out of Ketchikan and go to that miserable little fish shack again. I like a bed. I'll do a little bit of hiking. You can't drag me for 3 hours, but
but
destination,
what about boats? You have a fear of boats?
not as long as I can see the shore.
Okay.
Doesn't mean I can swim to the shore. I just like to visually see the shore.
Yeah, no, it's
You know,
false
it's
sense
kind
of
of like
security, really, but
yeah, it's kind of like a plane. You could be crossing Lake Michigan in a plane, and you could be upside down and you would not know it, right? But if I could see the shore, I would know we're upside down.
yeah.
So boat, I want to see the shore.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you,
there's definitely some stuff you haven't seen. And I think that's what I would say to anybody that's looking to come to Alaska is you try to catch a timeline that you can do more than one thing. Maybe some waterfowl, maybe some sea ducks. Sea ducks are something up here that people I think underutilize a little bit. We have massive, massive quantities of divers that fly through here, and it's a logistics thing. It's to get out into the areas. If you want to do that in actual saltwater, you'll pick up some divers hunting puddle ducks as well. They come ripping through your set real fast before you even have time to put your coffee down.
yeah,
But so sea ducks are something that's a little bit underutilized here in Alaska, I think. But there are some places that can outfit those kind of hunts that are closer to South Central as well. But if you could time something where you could pick up some ducks, some ptarmigan, again, it's the season. So right now, October 13th today, the snow's coming down the mountains out our window, and it's going to start filling up, and we're going to start running into that for ptarmigan. Not that you can't hunt, but eventually at some point,
yeah.
Avalanches are a thing.
Oh,
You have to be wary about. I will say, Alaska is probably the only NAVDA chapter in existence that's ever had avalanche classes as part of our training days. Um, it's serious.
I'm totally agreeing with you, but you're making me laugh. But you're right. You
So,
know,
I mean, those are things that we contend with up here.
yeah,
Is getting to the areas where the birds are, and that's a common theme among hunting in Alaska, though. Whether you're, like you said, caribou hunting, up on the Haul Road, that has some unique challenges just because of the regulations.
yeah,
But it's logistics,
yeah.
logistics. And one thing I guess I would say, I mean, I have one of my dogs, has been in small planes, and by small I don't mean like Horizon Air. I mean small, like Super Cub.
Super Cup, yeah.
Um, and man, the first time getting him into the plane, and Super Cubs are fabric aircraft as well.
Right. We
And
call
so
them
our
paper,
buddy,
paper planes. They're paper.
yeah, I mean, literally, it's like saran wrap stretched over aluminum and balsa wood.
Hmm.
Um, and our buddy was like, "Man, I just rewrapped this. We can't, we cannot tear this up." And so now I'm like, "Okay, I just want to go home because the odds
I,
of us not tearing it up are lower, if I'm at home."
I
But
I have a funny story when you said dogs, and that's another thing you don't think about, but I'm sure people have had to do that a lot, right? But I went hunting on Beaver Island, which is either a flight or about a 40-minute barge. It's about a 10-minute flight or a 40-minute
is that in the
ferry.
Midwest?
Yeah, it's out in northern Lake Michigan. And I did not have a dog. No, this was Bravo, the dog I had on quite a few TV shows. Real character, he was like Marmaduke, but he hunted, but he was half human. And you can picture this. So the seas were too rough for us to get on they canceled the ferry till the next day. And our host wanted to get us to the island, so he went to the airport, and the guy said, he goes, "Yeah, it's a little windy, but yeah, I can get you up and over to Beaver Island, no problem." And this was a much bigger plane, but it was still only like the size of an otter, like a
Yeah.
little bigger than a beaver.
Yep.
For people who don't know what those are seaplanes. And the otter's more comfortable, probably sits like 6, 8 people, right?
Yeah, probably 10. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And so this plane, I don't know what it was. It was not a de Havilland, but it was a, a small ass plane with a couple of bench seats in it.
An
And,
SAP.
yeah. And the first two guys get in with their dogs, and the plane engine's running, right? And I'm walking up to the plane with Bravo, and the pilot takes the wheel chuck out and he flings it by the rope on the wheel chuck and throws it into the hangar. And Bravo goes and gets the wheel chuck and brings it back to the pilot. And the guy says, Are you kidding me? I said, Why? You threw the bumper, man.
But what did you expect?
What'd you expect? And the other two dogs were in the plane shaking like somebody trying to write a bad check, right? They did not want to. Bravo jumps up into that plane, and I've got a video on my phone of him just staring out the window on the takeoff. I was more scared of the takeoff than him. He just looked out that window and he was like, "Oh, this is cool, man. I wonder where we're going." But yeah, he was made for that. But
it's funny you say that. So Aspen, my younger dog, he was the one who last year we were flying in the Super Cub a bit, and once we got in the plane, he was fine. The engine starts up. I thought that was going to be a thing. Didn't even phase him. I didn't put little muffs on him or anything or whatever. I mean, I figure shotgun's louder in an airplane. But so we're in there and I'm holding him basically in my lap, right? I got all my crap behind the seat and I'm holding the dog basically in my lap. He's kind of on the floor, kind of on me. And he starts up, but we're on this little strip, and the startup, the taxi, and everything was fine. What was crazy, I've got a video of him. You say a video. We were running down the runway. I mean, a Super Cub takes off at, I don't know, 50 miles an hour, not very fast.
Yeah.
But his face, his eyeballs, when we lifted off the ground, big as milk saucers. I mean, he was totally fine. And then the plane started going and he's looking straight out the window. I've got video of his eyeballs just going, whoop.
Wait a minute. We're leaving ground.
Yeah. He understood we were not where we were supposed to be.
Right.
He understood that much.
The taxi part was just like a truck ride, but when you started lifting off.
Yeah. No, and then, and I don't know what this is in dogs. Maybe but they get all nervous and the dander and the dust. Mm-hmm. He sat there, he didn't shake, but that white dust right at takeoff started popping off him.
Yeah, you could swipe it off his back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was all over my clothes. I mean, he was a mess. He was nervous on the way over. Yeah. Plane ride number 2, he hopped in the plane, he rode back, he fell asleep on my lap. I mean, he was like, whatever, but it's sort of like teaching a dog to get into a canoe or something, Right. I mean, they're nervous as hell on the aluminum the first time, but number 2, number 3.
Yeah, they get used to it.
Yeah, they get used to it.
And this is perfectly segues into like the stories that Jordan and I are talking about, our dogs and hunting, is why Hadassah is putting together the film fest, because it's the story. I think it's the stories that keep us hunting. I mean, yeah, we always want to go out next season. We always want to get some birds in the bag, but that the dedication that you could certainly rate the dedication of being a bird dog owner in Alaska. You might have to be 12% more dedicated at least, because everything's at least
13, 14.
Everything's 30% more expensive. So you've got to be dedicated, but to tell those stories in a video format that everybody can relate to, right? Whether we get an Alaska entry or not this year, Hadassah, I don't know if we're going to get that, but those stories that we talk about and we laugh about, like if I could have had a picture, a video of the pilot throwing the wheel chuck into the hangar and my dog going to get that, I mean, that would take first place in the comedy department.
Oh yeah.
I know we're not having a comedy department, but the things that our dogs do and the things we do with them.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm assuming that's why this idea of the Hunting Dog Film Fest is because of like,
capturing those moments.
Capturing those moments, and then it's captured forever.
Yeah.
Not all of us are good writers. Like I couldn't write anything, but a good writer, that is hard to do a story where somebody else, but when you can tell a picture with a video and some music and a little audio, it's like you don't have to be a critic to fall in love with that. And And it just reminds you of why we do all what we do. Just like you guys go to the extremes in Alaska, but you're doing exactly what we do here in the lower 48
Yeah,
with a few more obstacles, but it's that same passion.
exactly. It's that same love of the hunt, that experience with your dog, that story, and then, like you said, capturing it in on video with sound or whatever it may be. You know, any story is worthy of being submitted. Any story is worthy of being told, and we want to make sure those videos are captured and shared throughout the gun dog community, but every community, honestly, because this is something that I've talked about also, this youth component is being able to bring this experience on to our youth and pass that tradition down, and also be able to grow it into something that really is, we talk about the conservation piece, but also kind of handing that off as well, and that responsibility. So those are all components of the Hunting Dog Film Festival. They're all things that we're looking for submissions and for stories. And so, like you said, no story is out of the concept of, what is it that's going on in your own world, and through the youth, amateur, and professional, we're excited to share those stories.
Yeah, I mean, I could go as simple as you could literally put your phone on a stand,
Yeah.
sit at the fire with your dog, and read from your hunting journal from your
Yeah.
last dog. I mean, nothing's off the table for an entry. It's the story that it doesn't have to pull a tear from our eye, but I'm sure a few of them will.
I'm sure they will.
But I'm so glad that we're doing this, and I look forward to seeing the progress of this film fest. And it got me a good invite. Apparently, it sounds like I might be taking on a boat somewhere to sea duck hunt at some point. Then
I know.
Mark your calendar for 25 sea duck. Let's do it.
All right, because I'm telling you, I'm a pretty good shot. I'm a pretty good shot at them sea ducks. I just don't. I ain't going in the water to go get them. I get a tender boat.
Well, it's about as a few steps as you got to take the bird hunt as possible, I think.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on. So much. I'm so glad we did this. I know when we talked last time it was more about the fest, but I said I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I don't think too many people have gone into depth. And I think you covered some really good stuff and showed how doable it is, and how how the people in the bird dog community, it got a little tougher up there, but that's not holding you back.
No, not at all. And it's the same crazy love for getting out with your dogs. It's the same crazy love for doing something. And sometimes, it's an excuse to do it.
Yeah. There you go.
That's 90% of the time. I think, the dog is the excuse to get some new gear, get a new shotgun, get a plane ticket. And Alaska is a great place to do that if you're looking for that kind of adventure and you're willing to put in just that tiny little bit of extra effort. But, again, I mean, as a big takeaway, I mean, certainly if anybody's looking to come to Alaska, if a ptarmigan, if a sooty grouse, if that's your bucket list bird, I would say, reach out to NABDA folks, reach out to one of the chapters up here, look for VDD folks in the directory that are in Alaska. I guarantee you, Alaskans, while we are a unique breed of individuals, they're also really welcoming, really open-hearted, and always down to help people out and get people out into the woods.
I think I'll title this one "Sleep Deprivation, Light Deprivation, but the passion that exceeds all." All right, Jordan, Hadassah, I'm going to cut this off, and thanks for coming on and little education and a little catch up on the film fest.